took a piece of iron to the head during the 1800s working on a railroad, and his entire personality changed from one person to another. Now, we could say that was due to the brain damage that made him, change a personality, or we could say that the physical, biological structure changed and then channeled a different soul or a different consciousness.
You?
Yeah, really, like I said, I kind of see systems, right? So as I see it, individual pieces of data, I'm able to kind of draw the connections between those pieces of data very accurately, and in a very sensible and logical manner without necessarily having to put any effort towards it. It's kind of like if I saw a clock which was missing a gear and I only saw it from the face of the clock, I would intrinsically know what gear, what size, and where it is that is missing. It just kind of naturally occurs to me.
Do you think that this was your path all along, that you were maybe karmically, maybe destiny wise, you were supposed to go through this? Like,
I would say yes. I don't think there is accidents. I don't think there is coincidences.
me
And I've experienced things in my life and in my creating that can only be explained through divine purpose.
Wow, man. I want to touch on this just for a little bit. What do you think? Because you went to one of the biggest spokesmen for flat Earth. What do you think about this whole phenomena of flat Earth, man?
Well, initially when it came out, I thought it was kind of more or less a practical joke of people on 4chan or 8chan that just wanted to, throw something around. I think that was around 2014, 2015, when people started really getting into it. But then, as they got into it, people started to find what they would call proofs and having their positions that made some sense. And I spent a few hours prepping for the debate, and I watched a couple of videos that were like 200 proofs of flat Earth, and went through everything that those people had determined to prove that as their worldview. Um, Now, as I look through it, my conclusion is that there isn't a conclusion. There is no proof that the Earth is completely round or globe, in the sense that NASA and most of the things like Einstein or NASA that are used to justify our current understanding of the outer world is easily debunked and not necessarily valid. But the debunking of NASA does not prove that, because we can't prove the Earth is round doesn't automatically mean the Earth is flat. So now there are certainly ways to demonstrate either theory, um, and there's ways to deny any demonstration. So I think once we inevitably get enough of the population that has concluded one or the other, and I think that will again be through demonstration, not through theory, then we will move into that reality as a combined consciousness. Now, I do have technology that is built for space, so
We're
of
gonna
course,
talk about that.
I intend to prove that the Earth is in fact a obloid spheroid, and that space is a real thing that we can interact with.
See, I must clarify my question, because my question was more on the movement. Because every time someone says, "Well, look at these flat earthers, they're freaking crazy," I have a friend where he's a brilliant human being. I respect everything he says, and he's a flat earther. So I'm like, I don't think we should focus on the shape of the earth, as to more focus on why this movement has come out, because I'm asking myself, like, we have all of these people that basically have had enough of the bullshit, where they really mistrust the government, they mistrust the people that are kind of leading things, and this is why we're getting the, because you can't just dismiss something when it happens in the, you know and how flat earth is happening, it's grasping masses at this point. So I'm
Well,
like, go
I,
ahead.
I think the mistrust is well placed. Mistrust in government is very well placed. And mistrust in authority, mistrust in official sources is very well placed. Now, the conclusions that they come to, I think, is a problem of trust. They're trusting other people on the internet because they say, oh, it's flat. Well, if you haven't seen it yourself, you have no idea. So the the reality of the situation is that most of the information that people consume on a daily basis and have been taught through grade school on up and through higher education has been falsified or falsely represented, or it is flat out wrong. And because of that, it's very easy for people to become disenfranchised. And when they become disenfranchised, they look for something to cling to, because humans are a community based species. We're a tribalist species. And Flat Earth is a tribe that accepts people who go against mainstream information. And there's nothing wrong with that. But truth is truth at the end of the day, and we're going to find out.
I wasn't aware that because you called it a debate. I wasn't aware that it was a debate. I thought it was, but I think Wissig gets it. He just wants to debate everyone, man. Like,
Well, it was initially supposed to be a debate. I think he labeled it a discussion, and that's fair as well. And it was a back and forth, and it wasn't by any means, a it wasn't a heated debate. It was a respectful discourse between two adults, as it should be.
hmm a lot of people, say he basically just speaks a lot of word salad and things like that. I myself think he's like a pretty cool and brilliant dude, man. What do you think?
I think he's very intelligent. I do. I don't have anything bad to say about Austin Witz. It's a matter of, it's more about technique. It's more about the scientific method and the application of logic in thought patterns. Now, I think he's very well read and he's got a lot of information. I think I may have him at a disadvantage because I am an acquired savant with the ability to connect and conclude things based off very little information, whereas he's got a lot of information and he's still struggling, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, man. I think ultimately he means well, So I wanted to ask you that, and do you still have time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you like a quick question, and then we're gonna get into like stuff that like really more things that I really wanted to ask you about, like Tartaria and Tesla and things like that. But before that, I want to ask you, what do you think about reincarnation, man?
So reincarnation is actually one of the things that I would use if I were to go on to do my doctorate in neuropsychology. I would like to focus on universal consciousness as a theory. Reincarnation is something that can actually be demonstrated throughout multiple points in history where there have been children with memories of past lives that are largely otherwise impossible. Able to remember things from those lives, and even at times able to point out where their body was buried, and to finger the murderer in their own past life. But it's not a standalone situation in a theory of universal consciousness. There's also been famous cases like Phineas Gage, who took a piece of iron to the head during the 1800s working on a railroad, and his entire personality changed from one person to another. Now, we could say that was due to the brain damage that made him, change a personality, or we could say that the physical biological structure changed and then channeled a different soul or a different consciousness. Just as a child born with a similar biological physical structure and brain might channel a similar soul that had previously inhabited someone on this earth. Now, we could also see cases where there are twins born and separated at birth and grow up with almost identical lives. And why are they almost identical? Is
Crazy.
it the genetics that cause them to have the same career and a spouse with the same name and same career, and name their kids and cats and dogs all the same names? Or is it that they have a similar biological structure that channels a similar soul that gives a similar result? And I think if we also look at coma patients, we've had patients come out of comas to speak a language they had never learned in their life. So for that to be possible, that means that memories and consciousness has to be transferable from outside of the body to inside the body. Now, at a quantum physics level and at a experiential level and at a demonstrable level of history, we can determine and prove that consciousness is universal and it is channeled, not inherent to the brain.
What do you think? Damn, I just freaking lost my train of thought, man. Yeah, there was this story. I wanted to ask you something, but there was a story with I don't know if you ever heard, with a little girl in Russia, like throughout her childhood up to 5 years old, she's like telling her parents about these things that obviously she hasn't lived through. And
Yep.
then all of a sudden, when she's 5, she's like begging her mom and dad to take her to a certain place in Moscow, and her parents were dismissing this. But at one point, like, the girl is describing, the building, like the address, like everything. So they're like, all right, let's go check it out, man. So they take this girl, they take her to this building. The address exists, the building exists. The girl walks in, 5 years old. She walks in a building. She's walking up the stairs. She goes up to the apartment, like the certain apartment that she was describing, knocks on the door. A lady opens up, and this lady was, depressed for a couple of years, and it turns out that the little girl was a reincarnation of the lady's husband. And the girl walks into the apartment like she's back home, knows where everything is, goes to, things that she used to own. And there's millions of stories like that. But the deeper question is, how does DNA tie into reincarnation?
So DNA is something that is instructional, right? It's data, but it instructs what the structure of the larger organism is going to end up at ultimately, right? So you go from your sperm and your zygote and your egg, and you're actually, if you look at the structure of a sperm, and I know this is probably a weird subject for some people. If you're tuning in right now, just stick with me. The structure is actually similar to the structure of the spinal cord and the brain, right? So it's as this zygote grows into the full-on embryo and then the body, all of that instruction comes from that generational DNA. So the chances of somebody having a similar biological physical structure that will channel a soul that is similar to someone in their own familial line and history is much greater than the chances that somebody, many generations of cousins removed would align with that person in that history. But as you said, there's been instances where, a little girl that probably had no relation to the man, the husband of the woman in Moscow, and her brain just happened to channel that soul. So, of course, without knowing what structures determine the channeling of a soul, and for those who don't understand dimensions, this will be a little bit complicated to say, but we do have scientific proof of 11 different dimensions existing simultaneously within the human brain.
Mhm.
So right now, we barely have gotten okay at measuring two-dimensional graphs of CT scans and X-rays and constructing those into pretty crappy 3D models of the human brain. So our level of understanding of what's going on in the human brain is very, very rudimentary. I'd almost say it's non-existent at this point. once we understand what the structures are that actually channel the soul up through the 11th dimension, we might be able to better understand what would enable one soul to go from an individual here to an individual over there.
Man, I gotta freaking send you the Slavic Vedas. Your mind is gonna be blown, man. You're gonna be like, a lot of this stuff that you are saying is in that book, man. And you know, this is what I was gonna ask you, where I lost my train of thought. What do you think about past life regression, and have you tried it?
So I have not personally tried it. I if someone deems it's worth the risk to try it, I do think there could be risks if you're trying to regress into past lives, or regress your mind in any kind of way, or open your mind in any kind of way. There's always the risk that you don't find your way back.
Yeah.
So I would just caution everyone to do so at their own risk.
I always tell people, be very, very weary at any sort of hypnosis, man, and especially of past life regression, because perhaps you could actually see or remember something that you're not going to be able to handle, and add on to trauma. I guess there is a purpose of why we go into this blackout when coming into a new life, where actually in the Slavic Vedas it says that people of our ancestors, they were able to, remember all of these things. But as more, we call it in the Vedas, we call it the Kali Yuga, the period of darkness, and we have been in a period of darkness consciously for the past 6-7 thousand years, and we're actually starting to come out now.
I would
um, yeah, so let's get into more of your specialties. And I've never heard you. I've watched a bunch of your interviews, if you will, but I haven't heard you get into in depth of this, um, because this is, from what I understand, this is what you're tapping into. Uh, who was Tesla and Tartaria, like, and how do these add up together, man?